Okay, well, let's turn to Revelation. And we're about a third of the way through the book at this point, and moving into there we go. Moving into a portion of the book where we're continuing in the kind of the middle portion of the book, which in a lot of ways is the heart of the book. And so you remember chapter 1 is just that introduction where Jesus comes to John on the Isle of Patmos with the revelation. And then in chapters 2 and 3, we have the letters to the 7 churches. And if you remember, those are 7 churches on actually a mail delivery route in the province of Asia, which is the southwest portion of what we call Turkey today, province of Asia. It's actually a mail delivery route, and it goes in order from the beginning of the route to the end of the route. It goes from Ephesus back around to Ephesus. And the letters, all the churches are on that route, and it follows the order going clockwise from Ephesus back to Ephesus. And remarkably, when you think of this being in the first century, the 90s, 90 AD, so you know we're only one generation away from the apostles, and 5 of the 7 churches are having problems. So you know when you see somebody look around the churches in the United States today and bemoan the state of the situation, it's been going on for 2,000 years. So nothing new under the sun, right? Churches are made up of a bunch of redeemed sinners. So then chapters 4 and 5, we have that scene in heaven where Jesus Christ receives from the one seated on the throne the title deed to the earth. And this is a more detailed view of the vision in Daniel chapter 7 of one like a son of man receiving a kingdom from the Ancient of Days. So Daniel 7 has a great vision of Daniel's that prophesies the end of human government and its replacement by the kingdom of God. And we see a more detailed version of that in Revelation 4 and 5. And so Jesus, the lion and the lamb, the Lion of Judah, who appears as a lamb slain, receives the scroll from the one seated on the throne, and it's sealed with 7 seals. And so last week in chapter 6 and 7, we looked at the beginning of the opening of the 7 seals. And so we had the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. We saw the martyrs under the throne. And then we saw a worldwide earthquake. And those are the first 6 seals. So now John has given us an outline of the book in verse 19 of chapter 1. Write the things which you have seen, that's chapter 1, the things which are, that's chapters 2 and 3, and the things which will take place after these things. So that's the rest of the book. All right. So 4 and 5 is set in heaven. 6 and 19 alternates back, and 6 and 19 is the period of the tribulation. So chapters 6 through 19, that's the period of the tribulation. And that tribulation is going to unfold in 3 acts of 7 scenes. All right. And then in chapter 20, we'll jump to the millennium and the final judgment, and then we'll see the new heavens and the new earth. So we'll end on a very high note here in a few weeks. Now, so the tribulation judgments occur in 3 sets of 7 judgments. So there's 7 seal judgments, and we opened 6 of the 7 seals last week. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the Christian martyrs under the throne, and then a worldwide earthquake, in which the leaders of the world recognize that God is wrathful toward their kingdoms. So that is recognized by them verbally with the 6th seal. But when the 7th seal is opened, it's not the end. Instead, the 7th seal reveals 7 trumpet judgments. And these unfold in chapters 8 and 9, which we'll cover today. Now, the seventh seal is not the end. So the last trumpet is not the end. Okay. The seventh trumpet reveals 7 bowl judgments in which the wrath of God is fulfilled. So God's final wrath against the kingdoms of man is finally fully satisfied with the 7 bowl judgments. So the 7th bowl judgment ends with the overthrow of the Antichrist and his kingdom. And the Antichrist and his false prophet are thrown alive into the lake of fire. So we'll get there when we get to chapter 19. Now, so notice we've got the seals in 6 through 8. We've got the trumpets in 8 through 9, and then the bowls are in 16 through 19. So what happens in 10 through 15? Well, 10 through 15, we're going to have a series of visions that are going to give us an overview of what's going on in heaven and on earth. And that's where we meet the Antichrist. That's where we meet the beast, who is the Antichrist false prophet. That's also where we see the world system, the world deception system and illusion system, which Satan has put together to deceive the people of the earth so that they might live their lives without ever having to think about their eternal fate. And that's Babylon the Great. So we'll meet Babylon the Great in that section from 10 through 15, and then we'll hit the bowl judgments. So don't get confused when we get to chapter 16 and suddenly there's a step back and it looks like we're back at the beginning, even before the tribulation, because these are big picture views. Right? So there is a chronology. We go from the seals to the trumpets to the bowls, and that's a chronology. But then in the middle of the book, we're going to step back and get a big picture view. And there's tremendous insight in this section into what Satan is doing in the world today. Tremendous insight. And if you want to read an interesting book, I'd recommend John Lennox's book, 2084. So not 1984, but 2084. So Lennox is a mathematician at Oxford University who's a believer, and he's a mathematician at Oxford. And in his book, he says the most remarkable thing about artificial intelligence is it's predicted in the book of Revelation. So if you want to enjoy his view of what's happening with identity tracking, facial recognition software, embedded chips, cell phone tracking, you see what he thinks of all that's going on. 2084 by John Lennox. So so here's kind of here's a graphic of the book of Revelation. It says tribulation here. This is the section that we're in right now, which runs from chapter 6 through chapter 19. And I want to spend just a minute. I know that won't work, but spend just a minute on the rapture. And so, this is from Thomas Constable's commentary on the whole Bible. This is from his Revelation, book of Revelation section. So Constable's notes. If you want to read in more detail about this, you can look for Thomas Constable or Constable's notes. These are actually his lecture notes from his teaching at Dallas Seminary. And they're free. So when I look at the doctrine of the rapture, the church is every Bible-believing Christian does not believe the rapture will occur before the tribulation. And I just listened to R.C. Sproul's lectures on systematic theology, and he ends with, there is not a shred of evidence for pre-tribulational rapture anywhere in the Bible. He can't understand how anyone could be so confused as to think that the rapture occurred before the tribulation. So which to me is kind of one of the things you say when you're really not sure what's right. you want to shut off the debate before it begins. So it's a ridiculous statement. The principal reason that I believe in the pre-tribulational rapture is the nature of the judgments in the tribulation. They are an outpouring of God's wrath on rebellious mankind, on Satan's kingdom. So who's the prince of power of the air? Who's the spirit now at work among the sons of disobedience? Satan. All the world lies in the power of the evil one. All the world lies in the power of God. Does God rule the world today? God rules the world in that he is sovereign, but the direct rule of the world, all the world lies in the power of the evil one. And when we meet Babylon the Great, as we move forward in Revelation, we're going to see this great system for deceiving humanity and confusing humanity that Satan has constructed. And so the judgments fall on Satan's kingdom, and the judgment falls on the system that he has put together to deceive people so that they wouldn't come to know Christ. So the nature of the judgments are judgments on unbelievers. And so we saw this in Revelation 3. Because you have kept the word of my perseverance, I will keep you from the hour of testing, that hour which is about to come upon the whole world. Now, he says, from the hour of testing. The Greek word is ek. This is a principal preposition used with the genitive case. So the genitive, the genesis or generative, it's something that comes from. So when it says ek, and then, so it says out of the testing, out of the hour of testing, it's taking it out of. I take my wallet out of my pocket to pay for the donuts this morning on the way to class. All right. I took my wallet out of my pocket. I will keep you out of the hour of testing that's coming upon the world, to test the whole world, to test those that dwell upon the world, upon the earth. So you kept my word, I will keep my word and keep you out of that hour of testing, which is about to come upon the whole world. That's a pretty straightforward statement. Now, let's see, I had this one next. There is a passage that speaks directly to the nature of the rapture. Unfortunately, because of the decisions that have been made in translation over the centuries, over the last 5 centuries, it's obscured. So this is 2 Thessalonians. And if you remember 2 Thessalonians, Paul is writing to Thessalonians and he said, hey, just because somebody sent you a letter that said Christ has already come, you shouldn't be worried about that. I already explained to you that that can't happen without certain things having occurred first. And he said, now request you, brethren, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, you haven't been forgotten. You haven't been left. It's not possible that you were left. Okay. That you not be quickly shaken from your composure or disturbed either by a spirit or a message or a letter as if from us. If you receive a letter that says from Paul and it says that the Lord is already here, just throw it in the fire. You don't need to read it. It's not possible. Okay. Let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first. Now, does anybody remember the Greek word for apostasy? What?
You got it right there.
Yeah, the Greek word for apostasy is apostamy. That's not a translation, it's a transliteration. It's just like the Greek word for baptize is baptize. The Greek word for baptize is baptizo, which means to dip or immerse or to dye, D-Y-E, something. So the Greek word for apostasy is apostasy, and what it means is to leave. It means to depart. Look at Luke 24:51. While he was blessing them, he departed from them. He parted from them and was carried up into heaven. You know what the Greek word for departed or parted for is in Luke 24:51? Apostasy, episteme. Yeah, it literally means to depart. So now, if you read MacArthur commentary on 2 Thessalonians, he will say it can't mean the rapture, because in all of the patristic writings, the word apostasy is only used to talk about doctrinal error. And he's correct that the noun form is used in the writings of the church fathers only to mean departure from the true faith. But the verb form always means to leave on a journey. In episteme, histeme is the word to stand, and ap is the preposition for being away from. So episteme literally means to step away. How's that for a description of the rapture? Going to step away.
Is there a different spelling or something between the noun and the verb?
No. Nope.
Okay, so how would we know if it's a noun or a verb?
Well, so here it's the apostasy, so it's a noun. It's a description of a thing.
Okay.
Whereas in Luke, where he says he departed, so he parted from them, he stepped away from them and was carried up into heaven. So is it an action or is it a thing? Yeah, it's like baptism versus baptize. Okay. Yeah, so apostasy is the baptism, and leave or depart from is baptize.
Doing my thing, you're playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
In that sentence, things that I don't see any clues as to which one is used there, because either one can make sense.
Either one can make sense.
Well, I mean the definition of what
Yeah.
the departure from Scripture. There's a departure from belief at the end time as well.
Yeah, but I think if you put this in the context of the first century, matter of fact, this is about 50 AD. There's no worldwide church. This is the first time the gospel has ever come to Europe. The church exists in 3 places at this point: Palestine, Asia, modern Turkey, and 2 cities in Greece. So there's not a worldwide church to depart from. So for him to say to these first century believers, you don't have to worry about you having missed the coming of the Lord, because it can't occur unless the whole church departs from the true faith. There's not even any church to depart from the faith. So I think it makes sense if you read this as a 21st century Christian, but if you read this as a 50 AD Christian, 20 years after Christ, this would not tell you anything, because the whole world is already ruled by a man who demands that he be worshipped as God.
So in that context, it makes more sense.
Yeah.
So he's telling them it can't happen because you're still here.
That's right.
You haven't left.
Yeah. It's impossible for it to have happened because you haven't left yet. Yeah. So that makes more sense. Now, MacArthur gets around that conundrum by saying that the apostasy is not a departure from the true faith, but it's a departure from lawfulness. That it's a denial of basic human fundamentals of law and order. Yeah.
When is that
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this chapter makes this passage in 2 Thessalonians makes the most sense if the apostasy here is the rapture. So I think this is the clearest statement of the rapture. And unfortunately, because of this word apostasy, the transliteration instead of the translation. So if you translated this it would say, let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the departure occurs first. And what else would that be but the rapture? So, which is clearly described in 1 Thessalonians in 2 different passages. So, all right. So let me go back to Revelation. And so when we come to Revelation 8:1, the 6th seal, the 5th seal was on the scroll was broken, and we saw the Christian martyrs under the altar in heaven. So this is the great multitude of believers killed during the tribulation. We learned from chapter 7 that these new believers become believers during the tribulation due to the ministry, the 144,000 who are revealed to us in chapter 7. And then the 6th seal, which is back in chapter 6, we have the worldwide earthquake, after which the leaders of the world acknowledge that they are at war with God. They acknowledge that they're at war with Jesus Christ at that point. So when the Lamb broke the 7th seal, so chapter 7, we see the 144,000 are sealed by God's angels. And then we see the great multitude that come out of the great tribulation as believers. And they're standing before the throne in white robes, praising the Lamb. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given them. And as each of these 7 angels sounds the trumpet, there will be another judgment on mankind. And on what we will learn in chapters 10 through 15 is the kingdom of the Antichrist, which is now a worldwide government. And another angel came and stood before the altar. So the 7th seal is broken, 7 angels come forth, each angel is given a trumpet, and another angel came and stood before the altar. So we're still at that scene in heaven that's introduced to us in Revelation 4 and 5. Okay. Now, with the Ancient of Days on the throne, the 4 living beings, and the 24 elders, and then the uncountable multitude of angels, holding a golden censer. So that's a plate hanging on chains, and what it was used for, we should put coals in it from the altar fire. So from the sacrifice, you put coals in it from the altar fire, and then add incense to it, and then it would be taken into the holy place to release incense, the burning incense, symbolic of the prayers of the believers. And you see that follows here. Another angel came and stood at the altar holding a golden censer, and much incense was given to him. So there's a big cloud of smoke coming up, so that he might add to it the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar which was before the throne. So this is the altar of incense. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints went up before God out of the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and threw it to the earth. And there followed peals of thunder and sounds and flashes of lightning and an earthquake. So the 6th seal was a worldwide earthquake that caused every mountain and island to be moved. So it's an unprecedented earthquake. And this is followed then by peals of thunder, sounds, and flashes of light. So there's a disruption of the atmosphere of the earth following the earthquake. Not at all unreasonable to expect that this is accompanied by a lot of volcanic activity and a lot of release of volcanic ash and moisture into the atmosphere. And so the prayers of all the saints, this certainly includes the prayers of the saints under the altar from the 5th seal. How long, O Lord, holy and true, will you refrain from judging and avenging our blood on those who dwell on the earth? That's the prayer of the saints under the altar from the fifth seal. Okay, back in chapter 6. How long will you refrain from judging and avenging our blood? And the prayers of the saints were added to the coals from the altar and cast to the earth. And this worldwide thunderstorm occurs. So, and the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first sounded, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were thrown to the earth, and a third. So don't read over this too quickly. Pause in your mind and think about what this means. A third of the earth was burned up. A third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. God's response to the prayers of the martyrs. How long will your Lord? When I was reading this last week, now this is a repetition of the 10th plague from Exodus 9. This is the next to the last plague that led Pharaoh to release the Israelites from Egypt. And it is repeated with the first trumpet here. So it's going to get worse from here. It's going to get worse from here. But, I always find it so refreshing in the spring when the grass turns green and the leaves appear on the trees. And all burned up. No more green. The second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood, and a third of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. So you think we have supply chain problems today? Okay. So probably this is something like this, is possibly a comet. Ignites as it comes into the atmosphere and lands in one of the major oceans. And all of the ships in that ocean are destroyed by the tsunami that results. Okay, so a third of the ships are destroyed by this flaming mountain that's thrown into the sea. Now, has it literally become blood, plasma and red blood cells, or does it look like blood? I don't know. The Nile became blood during the time of Moses. And I look back on when the Nile became blood during the time of Moses. And if I was going to guess, I would guess that there's some kind of plankton growth or some kind of aquatic organism growth or the release of iron oxides into it. Anyway, it has the appearance of blood. Not that it is literally hemoglobin and plasma, but of course, if it does become hemoglobin and plasma, that's even more of an inescapable miracle. Michael?
But I think the point is that the world shed the blood of the martyrs. Look at this blood you shed. You want to taste the blood? Here's a taste.
Here's a taste of the blood. That's right. Karen?
It could be like red tide.
Yes, it could be like a red tide, which is an explosive growth of bacteria in the ocean, which is toxic. The third angel sounded, and we're not even halfway through yet here. And a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. And a third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the waters because they were made bitter. So wormwood is describing a bitter, poisonous substance, also associated with a weed that grows in the desert. So This appears to be a meteor or a comet that explodes in the atmosphere, and then the debris from it settles in the fresh water over the face of the earth. So is this over Asia or Europe or North America? I don't know. But a third of the potable water becomes undrinkable. And we know that there are high concentrations of heavy metals and a lot of asteroids, chromium, cadmium. You ever watch the old movie, Aaron Brockovich? That was a chromium contamination. It led to the birth defects. So the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun and a third of the moon and a third of the stars were struck, so that a third of them would be darkened, and the day would not shine for a third of it, and the night in the same way. So Earth's illumination is reduced. So whatever green vegetation is left now goes into a slow growth cycle. Now, when you read these judgments, interpreters have different paths that they take. And so some of them, for example, will say, well, there's this first mountain that falls into the sea. Well, that's the destruction of human government. I think it's a mountain that falls into the sea. The pattern we have from the book of Daniel is that when something is symbolic, the symbol is explained. And that same pattern follows all through the book of Revelation. One of my favorite commentaries on the book of Revelation is Henry Morris's book, The Revelation Record. And at the beginning of his commentary, Morris says, the problem with the book of Revelation is not that it's hard to understand, it's that it's hard to believe. And if you just take it to mean what it says and you think about it, it makes perfect sense. And when I read the fourth angel, the plague from the fourth angel, what's just happened? Okay, we've had fire and hail mixed with blood hit the earth. We've had a great meteor hit the sea. We've had a great comet explode in the atmosphere, and we've had a third of the vegetation burned up. What do you think the atmosphere looks like after that? I don't know if you remember when the volcano Krakatoa erupted in the early 20th century. What?
Probably none of us.
Well, you might have read about it. I don't mean you were here, but I mean you've read about it. The amount of dust in the atmosphere reduced the daylight that reached the earth for a period of 1.5 years. And there was a record cold winter that next year. So what's gonna happen here? I think all of this atmospheric pollution is what reduces sunlight to 60% of what it was before the eruptions and the fires. You burn a third of the trees on the earth. I mean, I'm sure you probably remember, was it last summer that we could smell the forest fires in California?
So the fires, the smoke came in and we were getting the smoke from actually the fires.
It carried it across.
When we're just turning it.
Yeah, but I mean, but I'm thinking last summer, the fires in California and Oregon, the smoke was over us. You could see the haze. So you burn up a third of the trees on the surface of the earth. What's the atmosphere going to be like? Okay. So, and we're actually going to see this is going to go through a cycle. We're going to have an initial cycle where the light is reduced, and then we're going to see it gets really hot on the earth. So probably the CO2 that's released into the atmosphere. Michael?
I assume during this time that 144,000 are around explaining this to people, whether they want to hear it or not. Right?
That's right. That's
So
right.
it's not like the people in the earth are going, what's happening?
That's
We
right.
have no idea. People are telling them, they may not accept the truth, but people are telling them.
Yeah, and then we're gonna meet in chapter 11 the two witnesses,
Right.
who confront the Antichrist and who the Antichrist seeks to kill and is unable to kill until the midpoint of the tribulation. Yeah, great.
Do you think also some of the things like it says that, you know, the whole world will hear,
Yeah.
everything will come, that's actually during the tribulation?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. You're talking about the gospel?
Yeah.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
lot of it, I thought, you know, it makes perfect sense that there'll be the birth pains. But like one guy said, he goes, well, Jesus can't come back until the temple is rebuilt. I'm thinking, yeah, but not the rapture.
Not the rapture. That's right. So that's okay. You think things have been bad so far? With the fifth trumpet, we're going to transition to supernatural judgments. So the first 5 seals are human-caused catastrophes. The 4 horsemen, the conqueror, the wars, the famine, the death, the pestilence, the martyrs. And then with the 6th seal, we have the worldwide earthquake. And then with the first 4 trumpet judgments, we have these unprecedented natural disasters that are changing the whole ecology of the world. The ecology of the atmosphere is changing, the oceans are changing, the surface of the earth is changing. I mean, the world is becoming like a desert. So some of these post-apocalyptic movies that seem to be so popular, some of those scenarios is what the surface of the planet is going to look like. And we need to remember that when we get to Revelation chapter 20, because at the beginning of the millennium, that's what the surface of the earth is going to look like when we come back with Christ at the second coming. Okay. And then I looked and heard an eagle flying in mid-heaven. So mid-heaven means straight overhead, directly overhead. So in the atmosphere, that mid-heaven just means straight up. Okay. It doesn't mean he's outside of the atmosphere of the earth. Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth because of the remaining blasts of the trumpet of the 3 angels who are about to sound. Woe, woe, woe. These are the 3 woes. Okay. And everything that's happened up till now is going to pale in comparison to what happens next. When Joyce and I talk about the scriptures on the rapture, Joyce says, I believe it because I want it to be true. I don't want to be here. Now, is this an angel? Is this a symbol? I'd be honest, I think it's an eagle. I think it's an eagle. Animals speaking. Anybody remember any animals speaking in the Bible before this? We have Balaam's donkey rebuked the mad prophet. The snake in the garden. Okay. So whether this is a specially prepared eagle or whether this is an eagle indwelt by an angelic being that announces woe, woe, woe. So as we move on in chapters 10 through 15, what we're going to find is that the Antichrist is saying, unless you buy into my world system, receive the mark of the beast, worship the beast, I'm not going to allow you to buy or sell. And God's going to say, if you receive the mark of the beast, I'm sending you to hell. So you got a choice. You can reject the mark of the beast and believe in me and spend eternity with me in heaven, or you can receive the mark of the beast and go to hell. There's no repenting after you receive the mark of the beast, because you have to worship the beast in order to receive the mark.
This is wild with technology. I don't know if you guys have heard this case, but this is in London. There's a certain place where, you know, they monitor everybody's facial imprint. So one guy, when he went into the area, he didn't look up like you were supposed to. They find him, tracked him down and find him because he, didn't get his face scanned.
Yeah, so if you read Lennox's book, 2084, in the part of China where the Uyghurs are in Southwest China. They use cameras on the streets with facial recognition. And there are stations, and if your face is recognized on the camera, the police come out and download everything that's on your phone. And you're then held there at the station. This is going on right now today. Okay. Combination of facial recognition. And if you're found without your phone, then it's straight to the re-education camps. That's going on today, right now in China. Okay. This whoa is a gracious warning. All right. Then the fifth angel sounded. Okay, well, hold on to your hats. It's real important that we interpret these first four trumpets literally. What they describe is what's going to happen. They're not symbols. Because when we come to the fifth trumpet, something completely outside of our experience happens. And we return to an experience of things before the flood of Noah. And we're going to have a release onto the surface of the earth of the demons that were so evil that God bound them up until the last days. You know that they're fallen angels currently bound in chains in Tartarus. It's described in Peter and in Jude. There are evil angels that are so evil that they are currently restricted from access to the earth. They are going to be released with the fifth trumpet. Okay. So if you go back and read Genesis 6, it says, in those days, the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took whichever ones they wanted, and the children that they bore were the great men of old, the men of renown. It says, and every man's thought was continually evil, so that there was violence unstopping across the whole face of the earth. There was no government at that time. There was no police force. It was every man for himself. Okay. And that is the world that God ended with the great flood. We learn from Peter and Jude that those angels that transgressed their proper place and polluted mankind, which led to worldwide violence and evil continually, are bound up today in chains in the bottomless pit, the great abyss. They're released in the great tribulation. Then the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star from heaven which had fallen to the earth. We'll see this again in Revelation chapter 12. And the key to the bottomless pit was given to him. Morris points out that if you have a hollow sphere at the center of the earth, it literally has no bottom. If there's a cavity at the center of the earth where these spirits are bound, it literally has no bottom. It literally is bottomless. There's no bottom if you're at the middle. Every direction's up. There's literally no bottom. Okay. He opened the bottomless pit, and smoke went up out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by the smoke of the pit. So we've got these great comets and meteors that strike the earth. We have earthquake that moves every mountain and island on the surface of the planet. And apparently there is an opening into a subterranean prison in which evil spirits have been bound since the time of Noah. And this cavernous depth opens up, and smoke comes up out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. The sun and the air are darkened by the smoke of the pit. This is just the curtain going up. Here's what you see when the curtain goes up. Then out of the smoke came locusts upon the earth, and power was given them, as the scorpions of the earth have power. And they were told not to hurt the grass of the earth, nor green things, nor any tree. So normally a locust plague eats up every green piece of vegetation, strips the trees bare, eats all the crops in the field, takes the grass down to the roots. They were told not to hurt the grass or any green thing or any tree, the 2/3 that are left, but only the men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. So only unbelievers. Okay. And they were not permitted to kill anyone, but to torment for 5 months. And their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it stings a man. Now, we see scorpions and they're little things. Desert scorpions are several inches long. And the sting of a scorpion can kill a small child, and it leaves an adult in utter agony. Okay. So these demonic beings are given bodies and released upon the earth and allowed to torment humans. Now, the normal life cycle of a scorpion is 5 months, and these scorpions are given free reign on the earth for 5 months to torment people. And in those days, men will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, and death flees from them. Now, we're not told how they're prevented from dying, but I've had stomach flu a couple of times when at first I was afraid I was going to die, and then I was afraid I wasn't. For 5 months. I mean, indescribable agony. Michael?
On 9:1,
Yeah.
when it talks about I saw a star falling
Yeah.
from heaven to the earth, to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. Is that a flashback to Satan's fall from heaven before, or is that a current event? Because Satan does get kicked out of heaven kind of a second time. Is this a second time?
It's unclear, but I think it is a second time, because we see from the book of Job that Satan currently has access to God.
Right, that's what I'm getting.
Yeah, so I think he's permanently cast out of heaven, and we're going to see that in chapter 12. Yeah, Greg?
I got the other answer from the context, because it says I saw a star that had fallen.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's a good point. That's a good point.
And see, in my version, it doesn't say the word had.
It says fallen
A
from heaven.
star fallen,
Okay.
which kind of implies.
Yeah, you'd have to look at the Greek, how that phrase is formulated in the, so, because it could be a verbal noun. So, all right. Walvard suggests that the sting of the scorpion removes the victim's ability to use their free will to end their lives. They want to die, but they're inhibited from being able to take their own lives by the sting of the demonic being here. So they're prevented from it. So there's a certain amount of mind control here, or inhibition of the human will as a result of this sting. 5 months. Okay. So there's been nothing like this since the time of Noah. Okay. But these beings are released onto the earth. The appearance of the locusts was like horses prepared for battle, and on their heads appeared to be crowns like gold, and their faces were like the faces of men. They had hair like the hair of women's, and their teeth were like the teeth of lions. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots, of many horses rushing to battle. They have tails like scorpions and stings, and their tails is their power to hurt men. And in their tails is their power to hurt men for 5 months. So, this would make a good movie, wouldn't it? See these beings, like this Steven Spielberg, or the beings coming out of the smoke, coming up from the pit, and then they start landing on people and stinging them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Jeff. I mean, it's pure conjecture, but how big do you think they are?
I have no idea. I'm thinking that if I was going to guess, I'd guess 3 to 6 inches. So they're probably bug size.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope. They have a king over them. The angel of the abyss. This is the bottomless pit, where Satan will be bound during the millennium, and where these evil angels are currently bound. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek, he has the name Apollyon. Both Abaddon and Apollyon mean the destroyer. Their king is called the destroyer. So we don't have time to look at it, but if you look at the notes, which I emailed the class last night, this is described in Jude 6, 2 Peter 2, Luke 8, and Genesis 6. The reason I think these are angels bound since the time of Noah. Okay. The first woe is past. Behold, 2 woes are still coming. I think it's time to give up here and put your faith in the Lord. Then the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the altar saying, "Release the 4 angels bound in the great river Euphrates." Oh my goodness. And the 4 angels who had been prepared for the hour, day, month, and year were released so that they would kill 1/3 of mankind. All right. So I'm going to have to end on this. So at this point, a minimum of 1/2 of the population of the earth has perished. So the 4th horseman from the 4th seal were allowed to kill a 1/4 of the population of the earth. The 4 angels released with the 6th trumpet are allowed to kill 1/3 of the population of the earth. So if I've got 3/4 and I take away 1/3 of that, I'm down to 1/2. This is not counting the numbers that have died with the hail mixed with fire, the meteors, the forest fires. Okay. And so let me read Isaiah 24, and then I'm going to end on that. Okay. Behold, so this is a description of the day of the Lord from the prophet Isaiah. Behold, the Lord lays the earth waste and devastates it, distorts its surface and scatters its inhabitants. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men are left. This is Isaiah's description of God's judgment on the unrighteous kingdoms of man. So I'm like Joyce.
It's kind of like Merry Christmas.
And we find, Jeff, that in spite of all this, they don't repent.
They don't repent. Despite all this, they don't repent. Let me close for us. Father, we read of these judgments and we are horrified. And yet we know that apart from your Son having died in our place, we are deserving of these judgments ourselves. We have done nothing to merit your mercy and your grace, except we have believed in your Son. And we thank you for the immeasurable grace that you've extended toward us, that we would be called children of God, and such we are. We pray this in your Son's name, and we thank you for the promise that the evil of this world will be judged and the righteousness will be brought in. Amen. Merry Christmas.
glad we were all- I'm glad I it is. I'm glad I have. And I think that's-
Bye, everybody.
Spend time, talking about today. Yeah, well, you have a